My own daughter's husband sat in that courtroom and chuckled at my helplessness. Believing he'd already won everything, he smirked to his own lawyer. "Look at him," he whispered just loud enough for me to catch. So helpless he's defending himself. I was 67, seated by myself at the defendant's table. No attorney, no support, no one to speak for me. I didn't plead or shout. I just waited. And 5 minutes later, the heavy oak doors at the back swung inward. A silhouette appeared in the doorway. A man walked in, his suit looking like it was cut from moonlight. Hair like silver wire, a gaze that seemed to measure the room and find it wanting. The kind of attorney that makes judges sit up straight. The entire chamber went quiet. And in that single, breathless moment, my son-in-law realized his victory had just evaporated. "Thank you for joining me." Before we go further, let me know your here, drop your country or state in the comments below. I read every single one. A quick note, this story uses dramatization to highlight its core truth. While specific events are shaped for narrative impact, the lesson it carries is absolutely genuine. My hands were clasped on the cold wooden tabletop, squeezed so tight my fingers ached. 67 years old, and this was my final stand. The air smelled of disinfectant and old law books, the scent of finality. My only suit, the one I'd buried my wife in 3 years prior, felt too big on me now. Across the aisle, my son-in-law Evan held court, 39 in a suit worth my old car. His watch caught the light with every gesture. His smile was all perfect teeth and poison. "Where's your cavalry, old man?" he said, not even bothering to whisper this time. Couldn't scrape together the cash for a real defender? I kept my eyes down, fixed on the empty space beside me. Evan's lawyer, Simon Vance, was known as the Wall Street Volf. 50, impeccably dressed, a crocodile-skin briefcase at his feet. He leaned over and murmured something to Evan. They both laughed. And beside Evan sat my girl, Maya, 32, in a simple gray dress. She was a statue. She wouldn't lift her eyes to meet mine. I remembered her at 10, learning to ride her blue bicycle, me running alongside. "I won't let you fall, Pumpkin," I'd promised. That memory melted away. Now she sat silently beside the man dismantling my life. All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Reed. I pushed myself up slowly. The judge entered, her black robe flowing behind her. 60, with a stern face and hair the color of iron, she took the bench and brought down her gavel once. "Be seated. Case number 22CV1884, Henderson versus Henderson Blackwood." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Henderson, I note you are unrepresented. Do you intend to procure counsel?" I stood, my voice a dry rasp. "I do, Your Honor." "My counsel?" She assured me she'd be here. "He's bluffing, Your Honor," Evan interjected, unable to contain himself. "He has no one. He's completely alone." Heat rushed to my face. Judge Reed's eyes snapped to him. "Mr. Blackwood, you will remain silent unless addressed." Evan held up his hands in mock surrender. "My apologies. My father-in-law has already wasted enough of the court's time." The way he said father-in-law was a weapon. The judge looked back to me. "Mr. Henderson, this court schedule is demanding. If you do not have representation present, we must proceed." "I do," I insisted, desperation creeping in. She promised. "She called last night." Evan let out a short, derisive laugh. "Promised? Who, some charity hotline?" The night before, at nearly midnight, my phone had vibrated. A voice, weathered and deeply familiar, had spoken. "Robert, it's Arthur. I got your voicemail. I'm on my way. Just hold on." I'd wept silently into the receiver. "I don't know if you'll make it in time." "I will make it," he'd said, iron in his tone. "Just hold on." We hadn't spoken in 28 years. That call was my last fraying thread of hope. Judge Reed sighed, a sound of weariness. She lifted her gavel. "Mr. Henderson, I sympathize, but I cannot delay this hearing indefinitely. I'm going to have to—" "Please, Your Honor," I begged, my voice cracking. "Just 2 more minutes. That's all I ask." Evan leaned back, a picture of smug satisfaction. Simon Vance began stacking his papers, ready to leave. Maya stared at her lap. Judge Reed raised the gavel. Mr. Henderson, I am sorry. We will proceed with, then the double doors at the rear flew open. It wasn't the sound that struck me first. It was the rhythm. Step, 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 measured, deliberate, echoing in the sudden silence like a drumbeat. I turned. A man stood framed in the doorway, the hall lights haloing him. Tall, with shoulders that filled his immaculate white jacket. Behind him, two younger associates fell into step like a trained guard. Step, step, step. The chamber became a frozen scene. Simon Vance's pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. His complexion turned ashen. Evan squinted, confusion replacing his arrogance. What is this? The man advanced. Not hurrying, not dawdling, just moving with an unstoppable certainty. Silver hair, eyes the color of a glacial lake, and an aura that siphoned the air from the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. He'd actually come? The man reached our table. He set down a briefcase of aged, supple leather, the kind that speaks of quiet, immense wealth, and placed a single cream-colored card on the clerk's desk. Then he faced the bench. Your Honor, he said. His voice was calm river stone, smooth but unyielding. Arthur Blackwood, senior partner at Blackwood & Associates. Washington, D.C. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant, Mr. Robert Henderson. The room broke into a chaos of murmurs. A gasp came from the gallery. A journalist fumbled for a recorder. The judge's gavel struck wood. Order! But I was barely listening. Arthur Blackwood, Arthur, my friend from another lifetime. We hadn't seen each other since our service days. And now he was here, standing between me and oblivion? Simon Vance stood, still pale. Your Honor, this is highly unorthodox. Counsel cannot simply materialize in the middle of, Mr. Vance, Judge Reed cut him off sharply. Mr. Blackwood has filed his appearance properly. Unless you have a substantive legal objection, you will be seated. Simon sat, deflated. Evan was leaning forward now, his eyes wide, searching Arthur's face. His brow was deeply furrowed. Wait, he breathed out, barely audible. Is that? But Arthur didn't glance his way. He turned slowly, deliberately. And for the first time since entering, he looked directly at Evan Blackwood. His son and Evan, so smug and sure of himself, went perfectly still. Arthur didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He just held his son's gaze for a long, terrible second. A silent transmission. I see you. I know. Then he turned back to the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to begin by addressing the fraudulent financial directive submitted as evidence. Judge Reed gave a single nod. Proceed, Mr. Blackwood. One of the younger associates, sharp and alert, stepped forward and handed Arthur a dense file. Arthur opened it, extracting a single sheet. This document, he announced, holding it aloft, purports to grant power of attorney, bearing Mr. Henderson's signature. It has been examined by 3 separate forensic document analysts. All concur the signature is a forgery. He laid the paper before the judge. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of a calculated scheme. His assets were frozen, his wealth siphoned away, and his daughter has been systematically alienated by the plaintiff seated across from us. Evan jumped to his feet. That is a complete, Mr. Blackwood. Judge Reed's voice was a whip crack. Sit down. Evan sank back into his chair. Arthur didn't acknowledge the outburst. Your Honor, he continued, I will demonstrate not only fraud and financial exploitation of an elder, but premeditated malice in its execution. He paused, letting the words settle. And I will do so using the plaintiff's own digital footprint. The silence was absolute. I looked at Evan, his face cycled through shades of red and white. Then I looked at Arthur, my old comrade, who had crossed states to stand for me. He glanced once more at Evan, and this time the ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was not warm. The word escaped Evan like a sigh of defeat. Father! Asterisk, all color had fled his face. Every ounce of his polished arrogance was gone. He looked like a man witnessing his own fate walk into the room. The courtroom buzzed back to life. Voices tumbled over each other. Simon Vance's hand trembled visibly. Judge Reed's gavel demanded order. Quiet. I will have quiet. The noise subsided, but the electric tension remained. Arthur turned to the bench, utterly composed. Yes, Your Honor. Evan Blackwood is my son, which is precisely how I can attest to his capabilities. My chest constricted. My son-in-law. His son. Evan stood again, unsteady. You can't represent against me? It's a conflict. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood, the judge ordered. Your counsel may raise objections. You may not. Simon began to rise, but Arthur merely lifted a hand, a small silencing gesture. If opposing counsel wishes to challenge my standing, Arthur said, his tone even, he is welcome to. I have fully disclosed the relationship. I have no financial stake here. I am present solely to defend Mr. Henderson from the financial predation of my own child. The phrase financial predation seemed to suck the sound from the room. Arthur turned back to our table. He opened his briefcase and removed a thick dossier. It landed with a definitive thud. Let us begin with the foundation, he said, his voice never rising. 4 months ago, Evan Blackwood used a falsified document to seize control of Mr. Henderson's financial portfolio. Every account, a sum totaling $13.8 million, was rendered inaccessible. My client could not pay his mortgage, his medical bills, or secure legal aid. He produced another paper. This is the directive. A skillful fake, but a fake. The analyst's reports are included. Evan's jaw clenched. He looked to Simon, who was now studying the grain of the table. Your Honor, Arthur continued, Mr. Blackwood obtained this signature through intimidation. He threatened that Mr. Henderson would lose all contact with his daughter if he refused. The truth of it choked me. Maya's head turned slightly toward Evan. I saw a flickered out confusion cross her features. Arthur wasn't finished. And where did those funds travel? $7.5 million was routed to a numbered account in Switzerland, controlled by Avon. The rest was locked under the guise of estate protection. He let the implication hang. Why such urgency for $7.5 million? Arthur turned his glacial gaze on his son. Because he is indebted severely to a man named Victor Koval, gambling liabilities. And Mr. Koval requires settlement, promptly. Evan's face flushed crimson. That's slander, is it? Arthur's voice could have frozen water. We shall see. Judge Reed leaned forward. Mr. Blackwood, can you substantiate these allegations? I can, Your Honor. Financial trails, forensic audits, sworn affidavits. And I would like to call my first witness. He paused. Evan Blackwood. The room erupted once more. Evan walked to the witness stand like a man in a trance. Each step was heavy. He glanced at Maya, seeking an anchor. She looked away. He was sworn in and sat, his hand unsteady on the microphone. Arthur stood, fastening his jacket button. Then he approached. Mr. Blackwood, he began, almost kindly. When did you first meet Robert Henderson? Evan cleared his throat. 5 years ago. At a family dinner. Maya introduced us. And when did you conceive the plan to appropriate his assets? The question landed like a physical blow. Objection. Evan blurted, then floundered, realizing he had no counsel to object for him. Judge Reed's gaze was stern. You are testifying, Mr. Blackwood. Answer the question. Evan's neck reddened. I didn't appropriate anything. Robert is... He was struggling. I was managing things for him. Managing? Arthur repeated, the word laced with disdain. Is that why you installed monitoring software on Maya's phone? Evan froze. Arthur walked to his associate, accepted a tablet, and tapped the screen. These messages were recovered from a server backup. Allow me to read one, sent 20 months ago. He paused. Honey, I've called 3 times. Are you okay? I miss your voice. Please call your dad. My throat closed. I remembered that night, the silence, the worry. Maya made a small hurt sound. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Maya never saw that message, Arthur stated softly. Or the scores like it. Because you, Evan, had remote access to her device. You filtered her communication. You cut her off from her father. That's not, Evan began. Why? Arthur's voice gained an edge. So she would remain unaware of your activities. So she wouldn't question the sudden paperwork. So she would believe your narrative about her father's declining capacity and instability. Evan shot up from his seat. She chose me because he is a bitter, controlling relic who never gave her space. Mr. Blackwood. The judge's gavel struck. You will control yourself. But Evan was beyond control. His fists were balled. I offered her a real life. Freedom. What did he ever offer? Guilt and obligation. Sit down, Arthur commanded, his tone frigid. Evan sat, breathing heavily. Arthur turned slightly. Let us discuss Victor Koval. Evan paled again. Why do you owe Mr. Koval $2.1 million? Silence. And why is the payment due this coming Saturday? More silence. Sweat gleamed on Evan's temple. Answer the question, Mr. Blackwood, Judge Reed instructed. Evan opened his mouth, but no words came. Arthur faced the bench. Your Honor, I believe we have established a prima facie case of fraud, coercion, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I would also note Simon Vance stood. He looked ill. Your Honor, I must withdraw as counsel for Mr. Blackwood. An ethical impasse has arisen. The judge studied him. Grunted. You are excused, Mr. Vance. Simon gathered his things. He did not look at Evan. He simply walked out, leaving Evan utterly alone. I watched Evan look at the empty chair, then at his father, whose expression held only cold condemnation, then at Maya, her face wet with silent tears. He was isolated in every sense. And then the door opened again. The courtroom was still murmuring when Arthur rose once more. Evan remained on the stand, a trapped animal. Your Honor, Arthur said calmly, I have one final witness. Someone who can speak directly to Mr. Blackwood's financial imperatives. Judge Reed nodded. Call your witness. Arthur turned to the back. I call Mr. Victor Koval. The doors parted, and the man who entered was not from this world of briefs and procedures. He was a consequence. Tall, perhaps in his 50s, wearing a suit darker than a moonless night, a heavy signet ring on one hand. Two impassive men flanked him. Evan's face became a mask of pure terror. No, he whispered. Please, no. Victor Koval proceeded down the aisle, his footsteps echoing. He was sworn in and took the stand. He appeared utterly at ease. Arthur approached. Mr. Koval, please state the nature of your association with Luke Manning. Evan Blackwood owes my firm $2.1 million, Koval said, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. Gambling debts. There's a signed agreement. The interest is substantial and compounds weekly. The air grew still. Arthur produced a document. Is this the agreement? Koval glanced. It is. And when was repayment promised? This Saturday. Arthur gave a slight nod. Did Mr. Blackwood explain how he would acquire the funds? Koval leaned back a fraction. He did. On Wednesday, he told me his father-in-law was transferring all assets. He said, and I quote, the old man is signing tomorrow. You'll have your money Saturday, guaranteed. Evan made a choked sound. Did you believe him? Arthur asked. Koval offered a thin smile. At the time, I did. Now, he said, shifting his gaze to Evan, it appears he was deceitful with us both. Judge Reed interjected. Mr. Koval, are you here to register a creditor's claim? I am, Your Honor. Should this court seize any property from Mr. Blackwood, I wish to be first in line for restitution. Noted, the judge said. Anything further, Mr. Blackwood? Arthur shook his head. No further questions. Koval stood. He walked past the witness stand, paused, and looked down at Evan. See you soon, Evan, he said almost conversationally. Then he and his companions exited. The door closed. The ensuing quiet was profound. I looked at Evan. He was still gripping the arms of the chair, his knuckles bone white. Judge Reed cleared her throat. Mr. Arthur Blackwood, do you have any other witnesses? Arthur nodded. I do, Your Honor. I called Jessica Reed to the stand. Evan's head jerked up. Raw panic flashed in his eyes. A young woman, maybe 30, entered. She wore a smart blazer and held a small digital recorder. I watched Evan's last shred of composure dissolve. Don't, he pleaded softly. Maya looked from the woman to Evan. Who is she? Evan had no answer. Arthur stood. Miss Reed, please state your connection to Evan Blackwood. Jessica stopped before the stand. She looked at Evan with icy clarity. I was in a relationship with him for 2 years. It ended 8 months ago. The gallery stirred. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes glistened. Evan was on his feet. She's a liar. She's trying to ruin me. Mr. Blackwood, you will be seated. The judge thundered. He sat, his gaze locked on Jessica. Arthur moved forward. Miss Reed, could you elaborate? She turned to address the room. Evan told me he only married Maya for her family's wealth. He said once her father was out of the way, he'd leave her, and we could be together. She paused. Later, I discovered I wasn't the only one he'd made that promise to. Maya released a sob, a sound of pure heartbreak. I ached to go to her, but was rooted in place. Arthur nodded. Do you possess evidence of Mr. Blackwood's intentions? Jessica raised the recorder. I have an audio file from 8 months ago. The courtroom hushed. Arthur looked to the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission? Judge Reed nodded solemnly. Proceed. Jessica pressed play. Evan's voice, clear and cold, filled the space. Jess, listen. I just need to keep Maya convinced her dad is losing it. Once he signs over the trust, I'll deal with him. A facility somewhere remote. However it needs to happen. He won't be a problem for long. The silence afterward was a physical weight. However it needs to happen, the implication stole my breath. He hadn't just wanted my money. He'd intended to remove me completely. Maya stood. Her entire body trembled. You... Her voice was shattered glass. You were going to hurt my father. Evan turned to her, hands outstretched. Maya, no. I didn't mean it like that. It was just talk. You said you'd deal with him. She screamed, tears streaming. You made me think he was the monster. You hid his calls? You told me he was cruel and unstable. She choked on a sob. And it was you. It was always you. Evan tried to stand again. Maya, please, just let me explain. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. The judge's command was final. Evan sank down, defeated. Maya looked at him one last time, and I saw the exact instant the last illusion shattered. She turned and ran from the courtroom, her cries echoing down the hall. Evan lunged forward as if to follow. Maya, remain seated. The gavel crashed. Evan froze, then collapsed back into the chair. A court officer moved quickly, speaking into his radio. I sat numb. My daughter was shattered. And Evan, the architect of this ruin, sat utterly alone. His father, 10 feet away, did not acknowledge him. Arthur simply closed his briefcase, his face a mask of detached finality. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it arrives in a tailored suit. If you're still with me after that revelation, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment with one word, justice or heartbreaking. This story uses drama to underscore a real warning. Manipulation within families is a silent epidemic. Judge Reed called a recess. I didn't move. When the court reconvened, Maya had returned, but she sat in the last row, alone. Her eyes were hollow. Evan remained on the stand, a shell. Arthur stood. For the first time that day, he walked directly to face his son. Your Honor, he said quietly, may I address the plaintiff directly? The judge gave a curt nod. Arthur buttoned his jacket, then stood before Luke. Evan, he began, his voice low but carrying. Your mother, if she were here, would be weeping. I taught you integrity. To build, not steal. Evan's lip quivered. Dad, I messed up. But I'm still your blood. I taught you to work, Arthur interrupted, a tremor in his voice. To earn your way. You always sought the back door. The easy score. He paused. I covered for you twice before. Paid your debts. I believed you could change. His jaw tightened. I was mistaken. Evan's face crumbled. Father? Arthur raised a hand. 2 nights ago, Robert called me. He was weeping. He said his daughter's husband was stealing his life, turning his child against him. He said the name Evan Blackwood. Arthur's voice grew quieter. I wanted to hang up, to pretend it was a stranger, but I couldn't. He locked eyes with his son. I became an attorney to shield people like Robert. Good people who have no voice. If I shield you now, I'd betray every principle I've ever stood for. Evan's voice broke. So you're picking him over me? Arthur didn't blink. I am choosing principle over kinship. The room was tomb silent. Evan gripped the stand. I was in over my head. I was scared. You could have come to me, Arthur said, colder now. You could have told the truth. Instead, you chose to dismantle a family. You chose to gaslight your wife. You chose to threaten an old man's peace. He took a step back. That is not a lapse in judgment, Evan. It is a calculated choice. Evan had no reply. Arthur turned. He walked back and sat beside me. I felt a profound, aching gratitude. This man had chosen justice over his own flesh and blood. I placed a hand on his arm. Thank you, I whispered. He gave a single, tight nod, his eyes glistening but dry. I looked back at Evan. He had lost his wife, his freedom, his future. But the most devastating loss was sitting 10 feet away, refusing to look at him. His father's esteem. Judge Reed lifted her gavel. We will now proceed to judgment. At noon, Judge Eleanor Reed prepared to rule. She looked over her notes, then up at Evan. I have presided for decades. What you have done, financial exploitation, fraud, emotional manipulation, is among the most vile conduct to come before me. Evan was motionless. The court finds wholly for the defendant, Robert Henderson. The orders are as follows. She raised her gavel. 1. All assets controlled by Evan Blackwood are frozen immediately. 2. The property at 1717 Maple Lane is restored outright to Mr. Henderson. 3. The full sum of $13.8 million is to be returned to Mr. Henderson's control within 48 hours. A wave of relief nearly buckled my knees. My home, my life, it was returning. 4. This matter is hereby referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Potential charges include fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. 5. A permanent restraining order is issued. Evan Blackwood is to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Robert or Maya Henderson. She set the gavel down. Officer, remand Mr. Blackwood into custody. The bailiff approached with handcuffs. Evan stood slowly, his arms shaking as they were secured behind his back. Just before being led away, he turned, seeking his father's eyes one last time. Dad? Arthur stared straight ahead, unyielding. Evan's face completely fell. Then he was escorted out. The door shut. I finally exhaled. I heard soft footsteps. Maya was walking down the aisle toward me. Her cheeks were wet. Then, right there before the bench, she knelt down. Dad! Her voice was a shattered whisper. I am so sorry. I knelt too, my old knees protesting. I wrapped my arms around her. It's over, Pumpkin, I murmured into her hair. You're home now. She clung to me, sobbing, and for a moment we were back in a time when a hug could fix everything. We walked out of the courthouse together. The afternoon sun was warm and clean. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. You all right, Robert? Thanks to you, Arthur. I can never repay you. He offered a small, weary smile. Let's not lose touch again. Coffee, soon. I'd like that, I said, and truly smiled for the first time in a year. Maya walked beside me, the ghost of her old self beginning to return. The sunlight felt like a promise. 3 months later, the final act played out. Sometimes, justice is not confined to a verdict. It finds its own path. I was in my living room at 1717 Maple Lane watching the first snow of winter. A fire crackled. On the mantel, a photo of my wife smiled. She loved the snow. The doorbell rang. It was Maya, holding a box of pastries. Her eyes were clearer now. "Hi, Dad." We sat by the fire talking about her new job, her therapy, the quiet peace of a snowy afternoon. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said softly, "for letting him twist everything, for not seeing." I took her hand. "You're here now. That's everything." Later, another knock. Arthur stood there with 2 steaming cups. "Thought you could use the strong stuff?" he said. We sat at my kitchen table. "It was the right thing, Robert," he said, gazing into his coffee. "I'm just sorry it cost you your son," I replied. Arthur shook his head. "I didn't lose a son. He lost his way long before this." We sat in a comfortable quiet. Family isn't only the name you share. It's who stands in the breach when the world turns on you. Arthur raised his cup. "To family." We touched cups, and I felt a peace I thought was gone forever. At the state correctional facility. In cell block C, Evan Blackwood sat on a thin cot. His orange uniform was too large. He'd grown gaunt. The cell door clanked open. He looked up and his blood ran cold. Victor Koval stepped inside wearing the same orange. Evan's plea was a whimper. "No, please." Koval smiled, a joyless expression. "Small world, Evan," he said, gesturing around the cramped space. "Looks like we'll be roommates." Evan blanched. "Victor, I don't have it." "I know," Koval said, sitting on the opposite bunk. "But we have years to discuss repayment. In here, the interest accrues differently." He leaned back, lacing his hands behind his head. "You and I are going to become very well acquainted." Evan shrank into the corner. A guard appeared at the door, looked from one man to the other, and pulled the heavy door shut. The lock engaged with a final clunk. Evan Blackwood thought he could outsmart a lonely old man. He believed family ties would shield him. He was wrong. Justice found him not only from the law, but from the very debts he tried to escape. Robert Henderson reclaimed his home, his daughter, his future. And Evan discovered that karma has a long memory and a perfect sense of timing. Never underestimate the quiet resilience of a father's heart. And never mistake silence for surrender. Back at the house on Maple Lane, I stood by the window. Maya joined me, resting her head on my shoulder. Outside, the snow fell, gentle and relentless, covering everything in a clean, white piece. For the first time in years, all was as it should be, reflecting now. I never imagined my deepest wound would come from within my own family circle. But when I had nothing left, no advocate, no support, something gave me the courage to make one last call. Don't repeat my error. Don't stay quiet out of shame or hope. If something feels wrong in your relationships, speak. Seek help. You are not as alone as you feel. Often help arrives from the most unexpected quarter. Stories like this aren't just tailies. They are alerts. Financial abuse is real. Emotional coercion is real. And consequences are inevitable. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to Wines of Thought for more narratives that uncover hidden truths. Share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Final note. This story includes dramatized elements for educational and narrative power. While details are crafted, the lessons about vigilance, family dynamics, and speaking up are profoundly real.